In Michigan folklore, the Dogman returns every 10 years in years ending in 7. 1987, 1997, 2007. We didn't know that when we pitched our tent in October 2007. We didn't know the stories that started with lumberjacks in Wexford County over 100 years ago, or about the creepy song that used to play on a local radio station. All we knew was the sound of its claws on our picnic table and the sight of its 7-foot frame blocking out the moon. This is the true story of how my family survived a night with the Michigan Dogman. It was early October, right in the middle of a perfect Michigan autumn. My dad, a guy who genuinely believed fresh air could solve any problem, decided we were long overdue for a family camping trip. So it was me, my little brother Leo, and our parents. We were headed to a small state-run campground right next to the Manistee National Forest, not too far from Ludington. For Dad, this was heaven. For Mum, it was a tolerable weekend of reconnecting with nature. For Leo and me, it was one last adventure before the long grey Michigan winter locked us all inside. I remember arriving and just feeling this total sense of peace. The air was crisp and smelled like damp leaves and pine. The forest was a blaze of colour. Fiery oranges, deep reds and bright yellows all mixed in with the dark green pines. Our campsite felt perfect, tucked away at the very end of a loop and surrounded on 3 sides by a thick wall of trees. We pitched our huge family tent, a canvas fortress Dad was incredibly proud of. That first day was almost aggressively normal. Dad showed Leo how to build a proper campfire, their faces glowing with pride and a little bit of smoke. Mum actually looked happy, reading a book in her camp chair with a rare, content smile. I just wandered around the edge of our site, picking up cool rocks and watching squirrels chase each other up giant oak trees. When dusk hit, we roasted hot dogs and marshmallows, and our laughter seemed to echo in the woods. The whole forest just hummed with crickets and the far-off hoot of an owl. We felt completely safe, wrapped up in the quiet of the wilderness. We were just a normal family doing a normal family thing, with no idea we were trespassing in a place that held a very old, very dark secret. That night, we slept like rocks, lulled by the wind in the trees, totally unaware that something was already watching. The second day started out fine, but as the afternoon faded, something felt off. It began with the silence. Around 4 o'clock, as the sun started to drop, the woods just stopped. The birds went quiet. The squirrels disappeared. The constant buzz of insects faded out, leaving this heavy, unnatural stillness, like the whole world was holding its breath. My dad, ever the pragmatist, just brushed it off. Probably a predator nearby, he said, waving a hand toward the woods. A coyote, maybe. Nothing to worry about. But then came that feeling. If you've spent any time in the wild, you know it. The prickling on the back of your neck that screams you're being watched. I felt it first when I was gathering firewood near the tree line. It was this tangible pressure, a focused stare that made me feel totally exposed. I'd spin around, trying to see into the dense brush, but there was nothing but shadows. Still, the feeling wouldn't go away. A silent observer was right there, just out of sight. Later that evening, after a quiet dinner, Dad went to put the food away in the car. He came back to the campfire looking puzzled. "That's weird," he mumbled. He'd found tracks by our cooler. He grabbed a flashlight and showed me. The prints were huge, bigger than any animal track I'd ever seen. They were sort of like a dog's, but just wrong. They were stretched out, and ahead of the main pad were these deep, parallel gouges in the dirt, like they were made by long claws that didn't retract. And the strangest part, there were only 2 of them, pressed deep into the ground like something incredibly heavy had taken 2 steps and then just vanished. We tried to explain it away. A trick of the light, a deer track on top of another one, but none of it felt right. That feeling of being watched got stronger as it got darker. The campfire, which was so comforting the night before, now felt like a tiny island of light in an ocean of darkness. The woods didn't feel peaceful anymore. They felt hostile, ancient, and alive with a terrifying patience. When we zipped up the tent that night, the silence outside was absolute. It was the kind of quiet that isn't empty. It was full of waiting. Sleep was not happening. Every tiny snap from the dying fire made me jump. Sometime after midnight, I was finally starting to drift off when a new sound snapped me awake. It was breathing. A low, deep, guttural breathing like a huge animal, but it had this steady, calm rhythm that was just unnerving. And it was close. Way too close. I just lay there, my heart pounding, listening in the dark. Leo was sound asleep, but I heard my dad's sleeping bag shift. He was awake too. Then came the sound I will never, ever forget. A slow, deliberate scrape. It was the sound of long claws dragging across the metal top of our cooler. It was a curious sound, an investigative sound, and that made it 1,000 times scarier than a growl. It felt intelligent. My dad slowly reached for the big Maglite flashlight he always kept close. He shot a look at Mom and me, warning us to stay perfectly still. The breathing outside kept going. A slow, heavy huff, that we could almost feel through the ground. Then we heard footsteps, not four-legged scurrying, heavy, two-legged steps. The ground vibrated a little with each one. Something was walking on 2 legs through our campsite. With a courage I still don't understand, my dad crawled to the front of the tent. His hand was shaking as he grabbed the zipper and pulled it down. Just a tiny crack. He stared out for a long moment. I saw his whole body go stiff. Then he let out a choked little gasp, a sound of pure terror I have never heard from my father before or since. He scrambled backwards so fast he nearly fell, his face slick with sweat in the moonlight. "Don't look," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Its eyes. They're looking right at us." But I had to. I crept forward, ignoring my mum's silent, frantic shakes of her head. I put my eye to that tiny opening, and I saw it. Standing in silhouette against the pale moon, not 30 feet away, was a figure my brain couldn't make sense of. It was impossibly tall, easily 7 feet, with the wide shoulders of a man, but it had the head of a huge wolf or dog, with pointed ears and a long snout sniffing the air. Its body was covered in dark, matted fur, and its long, muscular arms ended in hands that looked horribly human, except for the wicked claws at the tips. Its eyes caught the light and seemed to glow with a faint amber color. It wasn't just an animal. It stood upright, slightly hunched over, like a sickening parody of a person. It took another heavy step, its eyes scanning our campsite, right over the fire pit, and landing on our tent. It knew we were in there. It had to. It let out another deep, rattling breath, and I could see the vapor in the cold air. It turned its massive body, not like a dog pivoting, but like a person deciding to leave, and walked back into the trees. Inside the tent, no one moved. No one even breathed. The 4 of us were just frozen. We stayed huddled together for what felt like hours, waiting for it to come back, waiting for the sound of claws ripping through the canvas. But it never did. We didn't move until the first hint of grey dawn lit up the trees. Then, without a word, we exploded into action. My dad started grabbing sleeping bags and just throwing them into the middle of the tent. There was no packing. Everything was just shoved into bags and tossed into the back of our minivan. My mom, her face pale, grabbed Leo and buckled him into his car seat. Dad and I did one last, quick sweep. The cooler was right where we left it, but now it had 3 long, deep scratches gouged into the metal lid. those two impossible footprints was still there. We didn't make breakfast. We took down the tent, gathered our gear, and all piled into the car. My dad drove away without looking back once, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The drive home was almost totally silent, except for my mum crying quietly in the passenger seat. What was there to say? How do you even begin to talk about what we saw? It wasn't until years later, when I fell down an internet rabbit hole, that I found the stories. The legend of the Michigan Dogman. I read about the first sighting by lumberjacks back in 1887. I learned about Steve Cook's 1987 song, an April Fool's joke that accidentally caused hundreds of people to call in with their own terrifying encounters. And then I saw it. The part of the legend claiming the creature shows up in a 10-year cycle, in years ending in 7. 1987, 1997, 2007. A cold dread washed over me as that last piece clicked into place. Our encounter felt like we had stumbled into a story that had been playing out in those woods for over a century. We never went camping as a family again. Leo doesn't remember it, or says he doesn't. Mum refuses to drive through northern Michigan. Dad sold the tent and won't explain why to anyone who asks. He refuses to talk about that night, that sometimes I'll catch him just staring into the woods behind our house, with a haunted look in his eyes. That memory became a silent crack in our family. A shared trauma that was just too weird and too terrifying to ever really talk about. We know what we saw in the Manistee Forest that night. It wasn't a bear, and it wasn't a hoax. It was something else. Something that walks on two legs. Something that watches you from the trees. It's a story we've hardly ever told, because honestly, who would believe us? But we believe it. We have to. We live with it every day. Have you ever seen something you just can't explain out in the woods? A shape in the shadows or a sound that made your blood run cold? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories from the edge of what we think we know, make sure to like and subscribe. You really never know what's out there.